In the shadows whisper your demons lurking in the glow. Ancient voices call our names through the fire and the flames. Demons are real, feel the fear, their whispers dancing your
Looking at the stars, bright lights in the sky. I ain't sure what it is, but it's making me fly. Spaceships zooming past, colors flashing by. I'm lost in the rhythm, feeling oh so high. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right. Alien friends wave, grooving side by side. In the cosmic dance, we just let it ride. Riding through the shadows, under the moon's gleam. Lost in the reggae beat, like a perfect dream. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right. Alien friends wave, grooving side by side. In the cosmic dance, we just let it ride. Riding through the shadows, under the moon's gleam. Lost in the reggae beat, like a perfect dream. UFOs and me, we're floating in the night, feeling airy free. Everything's just right.
All right. Good morning. Good wonderful morning. That was crazy, great. You notice we changed the live view up a little bit. So, good morning. Today's episode is titled Unity. And I realize we've been talking about this topic for a long time. We've been talking about it for a while. I mean, a lot of the episodes focus on, even without me realizing it, focus on unification of people, their beliefs, their interactions with one another, all these different things. And I don't know. I think we need to just continue on with the topic, but more in an overt manner. Like it needs to be um spoken about completely. So, a few weeks ago we spoke about mingling. We stole the name from Smirkanish, even though he wants everybody to talk about it, so we didn't really steal anything. Um, but it is very important because a lot of times in our society, we see a lot of people, getting into an argument and then going away. People look at like for example, like Trump and Elon right now battling it out, and everybody's like, "Oh, they're gonna be enemies forever now." But like, probably not. I mean, when you say that, you're looking at it from the perspective of if they don't agree with you, fuck them. If they don't agree with you, get them out of your life. The whole world doesn't agree with you. You can't you can't just go out and only be around people who agree with you. If you wanted to do that, you might as well just make a robot and put your brain in it and then make 500 of those robots. I mean, there's clone that robot like a bunch of times. I mean, you be a bunch of androids. Like none of you have no personality, no pizzazz or moxie or charisma or any of those things. You're just a drone because you the whole world has been built, the entire human race has been built on interacting with each other, with everyone. Even before when we talk about ancient hominid species and different things like that, we interacted with those people. And before Homo sapiens existed, there were dozens of other hominids, and you couldn't even call them human because they're not Homo sapien humans. They're some other being entirely. Obviously they might have similar DNA aspects or whatever because we're all from the same planet, but they those beings were different. They weren't humans and they interacted with each other too. Before Homo sapiens came into being, there was a lot of commingling and interaction between these species. They would go and work together and or separate and tribalize each other. They would go and they would basically either avoid that group entirely or they would interact and mingle with them. And then they would go and literally just like be like, hey, you're a person like me, but you're a little different. They didn't have English language and words to say like we do. Maybe they had some sort of other language or some grunting thing or whatever that they knew, but somehow they interacted with each other and they knew they were going to do so. And that I think is the key, is that they knew they were going to interact with each other. So they literally, and then when Homo sapiens came into being, we started getting into this more conflicting role. Like we had, for example, we know that some of the ancient hominids that are existing in these times, we know that they were able to create abstract thought and other types of things based on the things that they did in building small complexes for their families to live in or as we know now, is that the Neanderthals were creating cave art and other things. So some of these, as far as we know, we've only found one cave art, or a chain of cave arts that are undoubtedly were created by the Neanderthals. But who's to say that these other ones that we discovered before, that are 10, 15, 20, 30,000 years old, aren't really longer? I mean, we've talked about multiple cases where our measurement of time is just completely wrong. I mean, we don't, based on our datings, everything, our current datings are based off of, Christian calendars. And now scientists know that that's even wrong. For the longest time, Christianity was saying that Jesus was born in 0 AD at the precipice, and he died in 33 AD. And the reality is most scientists were thinking that he might have actually been born in 3 BC. Now, just last year, a new study came out where they think that he might have actually been born in 8 or 6 BC. So we keep putting the time frame back, and real so right there, we think that right there you have proof that our time frame of reference is is wrong, and based on those small amounts of evidence. And we know also, we went through the evidence that we went through the evidence that, just in the 1700s, they, in Eastern Europe and in Russia at the time, in the kingdom of Russia at the time, they literally would go and they measured it by whatever they were counting from before. So for them, it was like 7,700 and something. And yet, then they converted to the Christian calendar, and all of a sudden it's the year 2000. I mean, how do you go from that? And the Jewish calendar today says it's the year 5000 and something, and we talked about how that makes sense because Abraham was about 5000 something years ago, so we know that that makes actual sense. But you got to also remember that these other calendars, they're not based on our modern day calendar, is based on solar cycles and all these different things. But our ancient calendars, they were based on either the moon or the sun, but most of them were based on a combination of both. So they would monitor the phases of the moon and the phases of the sun, and they uh, channeled the year by that, and they had some advanced calculation where they would like add and subtract a few years to even it out based on the look of the moon and the sun. And we know that most of that is wrong because they didn't even know their position in space. Most of the time they thought that they were still having the sun revolve around them. So yet we still look at these um, examples as being defined in reality, and in the case when in reality that's not the case. It's not the case that they do all of that. So I gotta open things I forgot to open before here because I had prepared some things on here. So but so all these societies have been interacting with each other forever. I mean, there's this common aspect amongst historians to say that, oh, we are looking at the ancient world, and they didn't really interact with each other, didn't really travel out of their own areas because it was, not convenient for them. It was expensive. It was, it was, what's the word I'm looking for? Expensive, not feasible, I guess, towards people of those days. And so, these people looked at the world and said, oh, it was very difficult. I mean, they didn't have ships, they didn't have airplanes to travel in. Everybody had to walk or use a horse or mule driven cart or just ride on the animal themselves. Um, there was no communication. Well, now we know that all of that is wrong. We know that there was ancient travel now. We know that there was ancient communication. First of all, it seems to me that saying that they didn't do any of that flies in the face of what they're saying, because obviously people traveled, because human beings, Homo sapiens, not Neanderthals, not the Denisovans, not the Homo floresiensis, not any of the other ones, are still alive across the entire planet today. But human beings, Homo sapiens, are alive across the planet today. So obviously, human beings traveled. I mean, that's just they traveled, they moved around, they went across the planet. I mean, so to say that they didn't travel in ancient times literally makes no sense. And then you say that they didn't travel in ancient times, but we had the land bridge from Asia to Europe that people could travel across. Like, think about it. It makes no logical sense to say that they didn't travel. They traveled. They traveled the world. And what are you going to do when you travel? The same thing that you do today is that you literally are going to go and meet up with the people who live in that area, and you're going to go, gee, I'm out of food, can I buy some from you? Can I trade with you? Can you show me where, or tell me how to hunt in this area, the animals, where are the right plants to eat, blah 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 blah. Like all these different things that they had to do. Otherwise, you're not surviving on the planet. You're not going to go and just food's going to magically appear in your stomach and fill your belly. That's not happening. You got to go out and get it. So the only thing you're going to do is you either got to be an expert hunter, able to hunt any animal, which, remember, you went over there, and those animals that existed here on the North American continent didn't exist over there in Europe and Asia. So, or at least some of them didn't. So you would come across these animals, and either would magically know how to hunt it and eat it and skin it, and which parts of the beast were good, and was it a good animal to eat, or was it a forager who ate scrap and terrible things for it. All these things you had to know all of a sudden when you went to these areas. And yet, if you didn't know these things, it's like, you had no other choice but to interact with the beings that came about. I gotta take a sip of water. My mouth is so dry. Oh my God. Um, but you had to interact with these people every time you went. I mean, they were different beings and whatever, but you had to interact with them. There was no doubt about it. And so, so it flies in the face to say that they didn't interact. But now, we go and you look at, we now know, based on modern archaeology, that and other types of things that, I don't know what um the other type of science field would be called, but in through all these advanced areas of study, we now know that the Egyptians really did travel to Australia. There are Proto-Egyptian hieroglyphs, which means the old kingdom of Egypt, the one that was, 3000 BC and further. They traveled to Australia. We know this to be the case because we found Proto-Egyptian hieroglyphs. And then you go and you ask the local native Aboriginal tribe in Australia, who still today practice the same thing that they practiced thousands of years ago. They literally are one of the oldest Aboriginal tribes, and they even did genetic testing on these people and found out that they were one of the oldest indigenous tribes on the planet. And they even have a tradition that they're some of the first people to exist. So and DNA testing shows that they might be. So, and ancient astronaut theorists and me as well are promoting the idea that that there were different hominid species in different areas of the planet. And when you look at these areas, they have a natural isolation to them. And this natural isolation is what gives rise to the idea that maybe some sort of creator beings made multiple different types of hominids and then put them in different isolated areas of the planet. And then eventually over time, they began to travel and develop things and develop technology and weapons, technology for their times, like a spear. I mean, that's advanced technology to them. So like a spear, a sword, a sharpened rock. That's the level of technology that we're talking about for these ancient people. We're not talking about spaceships. We're not talking about, from 50, 60,000 years ago, we're 40,000 years ago. We're not talking about spaceships, airplanes, floating ships, motorized engines. We're not talking about that technology that we have today. We're talking about, spears and the first time using axes and all those types of things, sharpening stones to make knives and weapons and cutting animals, burning them on fire so as to not eat them so raw. I mean, that's the level of technology that we're talking about. And so when I say that these ancient people had technology, I mean that they had the beginnings of what we call the creation of technology, meaning the creation of the beginnings of making something to help advance you and your technology, because you don't have that natural adaptation to do that thing. You don't have the long neck to reach to the highest branch on the tree. You don't have the semi disjointed shoulders that monkeys and gorillas have that allow them to swing from trees. So we don't have that anymore. We evolved, our species, humans, Homo sapiens, hominids, evolved to have different shoulder positionings in order to be able to allow us to walk upright and grab things forward instead of always hanging from things, and or hunching forward and all things like that. It's very, they have shoulder blades just like we have shoulder blades, but everything's a little different. So so you look at all these different factors and you realize that these beings all interacted with each other at some point or another. And in fact, I've often said on many, many different of our episodes, we literally interacted with every one of these beings. Hominids existed for the past few 100,000 years, but modern Homo sapiens have only existed for about 40,000 years. Well, Neanderthals existed till about, between 40 and 20,000 years ago. And so did other hominids, and they began to die out over time. And some of them died out well before human beings, Homo sapiens, even came to existence. So right away, we know that all these people and beings were interacting with each other. They were either commingling or fighting against, and there was no other choice. Obviously, if they lived in a completely separate part of the planet and then died out before that they came to other parts to interact, they obviously wouldn't have interacted with those specific beings, but they interacted with more than one being. This comes along with what we talked about the other time, where it's tribalism. You have we're one group of people and they're another group of people, so we isolate to our own group of people because that's how we've survived for so long. And then all of a sudden, we meet these other beings, and these other beings, are coming across, and we say, whoa, they might not be friendly. They might not be, you know, want to interact with us. We got to isolate from them and then, eventually trigger into, or not trigger in, easing in to an interaction with them. So um it's all very there's evidence over time that we homo sapiens and other hominids have been interacting with each other forever. These beings are they were united in their groups, but for thousands of years human beings have been united too in our own tribes now and fighting amongst other people. Yet we interact and unify and do all these sorts of things by commingling with each other. You hear the what should I call it? You hear of the people, people these days are crazy. I mean, if you talk to people all the time, and if they don't agree with you, they just want to separate from you. They'll never talk to you again simply because you didn't agree with them. And that's pretty ridiculous if you think about it. Simply because you don't agree with somebody, that you're gonna not talk to them forever again. People do this to their own family members, to their own friends that they've known for years, if not decades. And our current political climate, especially since COVID, has been, I think, exacerbating this. Making it really potent in our society that people are doing these types of things, and it makes no sense to me. Why can't you go and talk to that person again, simply because they didn't agree with you on one thing? Like, dog, the whole world hasn't agreed on things. We've been fighting wars with each other for thousands of years. We've been blaming certain tribes and religious beliefs and all these things for years. And it's like, but we still intermingled with these people. I mean, think about Julius Caesar's campaign in Gaul. There were years where Julius Caesar went through Gaul and did not encounter resistance. He walked up to these people, with his army of troops, tried to talk to them, asked them if they knew about food, how to mingle with these people, how to hunt, where the local game was. And then he found out that a lot of these people were being invaded by Germanic tribes from across the Rhine River. And they actually asked Julius Caesar for help. and this is where just last week or last episode, I we weren't here last week. We had some business to take care of, and just last episode, I spoke about how our modern Army Corps of Engineers really gets its aspect and its roots from Julius Caesar's army, because Julius Caesar needed a bridge built across the Rhine to chase the Germans back, who viewed the Rhine River as a, immovable barrier. And yet he built the bridge and went across and went and attacked these people. And we know from Julius Caesar's own records that they didn't leave anybody alive. They slaughtered tens of thousands of people, not hundreds of people or thousands of people. Tens of thousands of people were slaughtered by all of this, and they went and literally defended them. And then Julius Caesar went back and said, "Don't worry, these guys aren't going to bother you." He's like the original mob boss. He's like, you know what? I made them an offer they couldn't refuse. They didn't accept my offer. So I went and showed them my iron fist, and now they get it. And, but these people continued to interact with him. They continued to go across. They continued to go and allow him to interact with them. And his enemy, Vercingetorix, of the Gaul campaign, the one who fought the famous battle with Julius Caesar at Alesia, they literally were friends and first. Vercingetorix was Julius Caesar and the Roman military. When they would go and conquer an area, they would do things similar to what we do today. Is they would go and they would train up the local people, make a local force, because they understood that the common people in that area, in that tribe, would respect their local people more than they would respect the Roman rulers, who they could eventually see as oppressors, because the Romans believed that it's the Roman way of life or nothing. And if you didn't agree with the Roman way of life, then you were nothing and you could be destroyed. And so they wanted you to Romanize yourself. They wanted you to Romanize over time, but not over a long time, over a short time. They wanted you to Romanize. And so, they wanted, so Vercingetorix was his friend for the longest time, was one of his disciples in the Gallic region. He was one who he was training up to be a leader of men so he could rule Gaul in place of the Romans. And eventually these people would become Romans. It's hilarious because eventually they did become Romans, and they did become, part of the society that they tried to fight against. But all these people, they viewed Julius Caesar and his army as heroes until that they didn't want him in there anymore, and then they weren't heroes. So people have interacted and fought with each other, unified with each other, and then switched up their things for centuries. But Vercingetorix and Julius Caesar still had a profound respect for each other. And this is even evidence in Julius Caesar's own journals, which, we know mostly about the Gallic campaigns because Julius Caesar basically filled 7 books. I mean, obviously he's going to point to his own glory and his army's triumph and all these things, but he wrote all these books and they've survived, or most of them have survived to this day. We know that about what happened because of what he wrote. So this is classic, classic example of history is written by the victors, which is so true. I gotta take another sip of this water. Fantastic. So, you know, the whole so but they because they understood each other. That's why they were able to have a complete respect for each other. They understood um how to well, they understood that each other was fighting for their own cause, their own people, their own things, but realized that they were people who did what they had to do. They were protecting their own, protecting their country, protecting their world. They didn't just think that they were, complete oppressors, and it's justice versus oppression, black and white, like we seem to think now. They realized that the world had a lot of gray spots, and the the thing is that they would literally look at each other and they understood. And this understanding is literally the key to human survival and skill and growth and all of this. I mean, it's you have to understand where each other comes from. Now, it's true that the Romans won, and a lot of the people there were oppressed, but if you look at it from a historical perspective, it was only really a short time. Eventually, these people, acquiesced to the Roman way of life and, were happy being Romans. They were happy living their life and doing these things, and they eventually became part of the society and worked with each other, and eventually they became indistinguishable from any other Roman, just like everybody else. So, all these areas became to be conquered, and over time they became the Romans too. All these people, they interacted with society. So without understanding and society, they literally, Piv man, you're gonna conquer me? Oh, don't talk dirty to me like that. um, but without it, what are we gonna do? I mean, you would just end up being, um, you would just we end up being a society that didn't get along with each other, which is seems to me like what we're getting into now. We're getting into now a society that um is just separating from each other. I mean, we're going to get into that scenario where it's two halves of the world. Where one half believes something and the other half believes another thing, and you can't interact with each other, or else it's just all out war. And this is the problem in our society. We're not unified like many of the times that we have been. Of course, we've been fighting wars for centuries, but society didn't start with fighting with wars and battles for kingdoms and power and all of that. Society started by people interacting with each other and unifying with each other so that they could have a common goal. Today, think about the massive workforce that they used to build the pyramids. Now I know I'm an ancient alien theorist and I understand, but you got to remember it's not the fact ancient alien theorists don't believe that the aliens built the pyramids. They believe that they gave the people the engineering knowledge in order for Homo sapiens to build the pyramids. And all of that could be true. And they literally would interact with each other based on they would I mean, think about trying to gather people together today, that many people today, to build a pyramid. I mean, you know, they couldn't do anything. I mean, J.P. Morgan didn't even want to hire a bunch of guys so Tesla could build his Wardenclyffe Tower. I mean, why? Think about how much of a massive workforce was needed to build the Hoover Dam. They didn't, or all the trains. I mean the train tracks that were laid. I mean it was a massive effect. And even in our modern era, to build all these train tracks, which ended up literally unifying our nation and making it possible for not only for the Union to win the war, but also for our country to expand further out into further territory. So all these things became possible through unification, and yet we also at the same time have are have separation. We're creating enemies of each other. We're separating people based on races and slavery and all these things that are arbitrary, don't even really exist in reality. And I mean, look at the problem is, we're having a problem in our modern day society about birth rates. Most of I was listening to these people talk about how, where in our modern society where we have modern medicine, modern hospitals, better health care and education and stuff, we're actually seeing a decrease in birth rates. You would think logically that if we have better health care and things, that we would have more birth rates because we're able to survive. Back then, only 150 years and more ago, what year are we in? Probably more like 125 years or more ago. They, 1900 or earlier. If you had a kid in that time frame, probably even more like 1910. If you had a kid before 1910, you had that kid had like a 70% chance of not surviving past the age of 13. So you would think that with modern medicine and modern survival rates and people living longer and all these things, that you would have a society of growing birth rates, because you could literally survive having more than one kid, and that one kid, those two kids, those three kids could all survive. And yet we see the opposite. We actually see that in our modern societies, our birth rates are extremely low, and yet you go to what people call, quote unquote, the third world or whatever, less modern areas, quote unquote, and yet their birth rates are skyrocketing. And you would think, oh, well, maybe they don't have education and learn about birth control and all these things. Well, birth control, it really should be your own impulse control. I mean, bro, you don't need to bang everything that walks. I mean, you could, but you don't need birth control. Your birth control is your impulse control. Don't bang everything that walks, and you're totally fine, bro. You're not gonna have a bunch of kids lying around, or bang everything that walks and have a bunch of kids lying around who bang everything that walks, and then you know what? Then the birth rate will go up in a few generations. So maybe bang everything that walks and don't use protection, but get consent first. Don't forget that. That's very big and important. Like seriously. This, the whole point with Julius Caesar and Vercingetorix, what I was bringing with that is they had a mutual respect for each other. Of course, we know that from the records that Julius Caesar was pissed was livid when Vercingetorix rebelled against him. Of course, because he's like, I taught this guy for the past 5, 6 years. He's been like somewhat of a protege to me, and then bam, he's my enemy now. I mean, that's not right. But you need these things, because without all these interactions, both good and bad, we don't have a society. You don't have a society if you don't interact with people. And if you don't interact with people, what are you doing? So you're just sitting in your room all the time, playing video games, not talking to people. And there are people who out there who have a genuine fear of talking to people. I don't have that fear. And I don't, and because of me not having that fear, I don't understand it at all. Like literally. Because it makes no sense to me to have that fear and that level of fear when, because it, I don't know. I'm just a logical person. For me, talking to people is just a part of life, so I don't have that fear. I also am on the extreme side where I could just go and talk to a million people for hours, or one person, or nobody, and just keep on talking. And it's great. And I love that about myself. And, I love to go out and talk to people. And it kind of sucks because it's raining today. And, so whatever. But, I mean, I go into the store, and I might go into a supermarket, and I might talk to five people there. I mean, I go to the same store every week to get my cold cuts, and the same person works there every day. I talk to them all the time, like literally every week. It's like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, you're back, and I'm like, I'm back. Like, it's time for my same lunch that I like to eat every week, and every day of every week, and so we have so why is it such a big deal? I mean, why can't you go out and talk to somebody, and just chat with them? I mean, it's like when I remember I mentioned this, like, I think in our Mingle episode. I loved when Snapchat and Apple had that whole turning on your location with your friends thing. I thought that was awesome. I was like, bro, finally we could all, talk to each other and interact with each other. And then everybody was like, ghost mode, don't do it. Only interact, share your thing with your family so they know where you are in case you get killed. Like, dude, you're not going out to the Midwest anymore. When people went out to the Midwest, back in the day, and there was that whole push west, the gold rush, you hugged your kid and kissed them a million times because you thought you were never going to see them again. Maybe you'd get a letter, or somebody would survive the trek back to tell you that your kid survived, but that's it. You once they left, you thought they were gone forever. You're not gone forever these days. You got email, text messages, phone calls, FaceTime, anything. You could still send a written letter in the mail if you want today, and it'll get there in a day or two. I mean, it's not like, like you could go on the internet and see things, social media, everything. You're not going out to the Midwest and never seeing your family again. Bro, people, like, I love when people are like, oh, it's a 45-minute drive. How am I going to survive? Bruh, it's 45 minutes. I mean, go watch a movie that's halfway through the movie is 45 minutes. If it's a typical hour and a half movie. Yeah. Like 45 minutes is not that long, bro. But yet people are like, oh, it's the worst thing ever. I gotta drive for 1 hour. Oh, Madonna mia. Like, dude, it's no big deal. And yet people are like, oh, you got to go through. People go in Ghost. They're like Danny Phantom. You remember that show? That was it. So people are going Ghost, and but why? It's your friend. If it's your friend, you should literally be able to look at it and go, hey, Jimmy's nearby. Hey, Lucy's nearby. What are you doing? Nothing. What are you doing? Nothing. Hey, let's hang out. Or, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm busy now. Oh, I was looking to hang out. Oh, well, maybe next time. Or, hey, I'm busy now, but I'm free later. Or blah, blah, blah. Like, why you gotta isolate yourselves from your friends, bro? And then these people are like, oh, and then they can't talk to each other, can't work with each other. And then my favorite thing is people get into an argument and then they say, well, that's not what I believe, so I don't care. Well, if what you believe is not factual science based in reality or nothing, and yet you choose to believe it, like because you want to believe it, that's not how life is. That's not how life works. At this point, the aliens are better off just wiping us out instead of helping us or elevating us or trying to make us join with them, like all these people theorize that they're doing. Sip of water. Oh my God, I'm so thirsty. I don't know why I'm so thirsty today. I'm like extra ultra thirsty. But we're not unified, and then our education rates are going down in this country, and going up in other countries, and but people are education, birth rates, our infrastructure, our government, our everything is in a decline, but on all fronts by all studies. Yet the problem is nobody wants to work with each other. This is the problem that they had. You think that we're different from 2,000 years ago? You think that just because Julius Caesar was 2,000 years ago doesn't mean that he has 100% parallels, one-to-one relationship with our modern day times? Fat chance, bruh. Ancient Rome was exactly like today. The only difference is, I mean, they had people on welfare. They had people who had no jobs, were unemployed. They had slaves. They had everything. They had a political government who couldn't work with each other. I mean, in the days of the Roman Senate, they had the consul, right? And the consul was a guy that they would elect to office for a 1 year term, and he had absolute power and authority. And he had 1 year to do all these things. And they use this as their, ultimate thing. They used it as their ultimate show of strength, their secret weapon, when they were invaded by enemies or had to go to war, they would plant one man in charge so that that person and the soldiers would be unified. I mean, they understood that the army needed to be a cohesive, unified military force in order to be, strategic. But they only used that in extreme times. But by the time Julius Caesar comes around, they were basically picking a new consul every year, sometimes every 2 years. It was rare they would pick a consul and they would give him a 2 year term. And that was like, oh, he's becoming a king. He's, because he's ruled for 2 years with absolute power. But The reason they kept appointing new consuls every year or every 2 years was because not that they were at war, but because the country and the Senate were not unified at all. They couldn't get anything done. They couldn't pass laws. They couldn't do anything because they were so disunified. They were so uh, against each other because they all wanted their nobility and their wealth. And then when the consulship became a normal thing, they literally would just have people rise up in power and wealth, and their whole goal was to literally become the consul. I mean, when you get to Vercingetorix, I mean, when you get to Julius Caesar's, before he goes on the Gaul campaign and he wants to become consul, he aligns himself with Pompey and with Crassus. Crassus is a wealthy merchant, and his whole thing is to use his wealth to buy his political way to becoming consul. And all it is I mean, they would literally do all these corrupt means just to become a dictator for 1 year. I mean, so by the time Julius Caesar gets around, this is the norm. This is the norm for them to do. They all realized that the society was dying because they didn't have the unification, and yet we're doing the same thing. Look at our Congress for the past 2 decades. They can't do nothing. They've literally just been pushing the deficit up and up. The national debt has just been going up and up. And then every time they're like, oh, do we get rid of the debt ceiling? Oh, do we not get rid of it? Do we do nothing? And then they ultimately decide to do nothing and change nothing. And then we all get mad when one person rises up and says, enough is enough. But that's exactly what Julius Caesar did. And now you're looking at Trump, who's standing up and going, dude, enough's enough. And everybody's like, oh, Trump. And look, bro, you might not like the way he goes about things. I might not like the way he goes about things, or other people. But like, dude, like, otherwise we're just going to be sitting in the same area of not being unified, not getting anything done, not doing anything, just constantly throwing our troops around, not funding anybody, not not doing anything. And this is our problem, and we continue to not be able to work with each other. And it doesn't mean that it's perfect. It just means that you have to try. I mean, you gotta try. If you don't try and get it done, you you're not gonna do anything. You're not gonna you know you're not going to be able to build pyramids and build bridges. I mean, have you seen the state of our bridges these days? I mean, it does not look safe to drive over any bridge almost anywhere. I mean, but it's not perfect, dude. You people want perfection in this world, in every aspect of life. But guess what? Nothing in life is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nobody in life is perfect going on. I mean, I'm perfect, because I mean, look at me. But but like, no, but seriously, nobody's perfect. And but that's okay. And that's what you think is not okay. But it's okay for people to not be perfect. It doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that they're not smart. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with what they're saying to be able to respect them or understand them or work with them. People could be, I mean, people could be a total moron, yet be a genius in some sort of other aspect. Just because somebody's not good at managing their finances or finances in general, but they're great at computer programming doesn't mean they're stupid or incapable of understanding something. It just means that they're better at one thing than the other. It's as simple as that. But we look at our society and we want everything to be perfect and instant. And I hate to say it, but I believe that it's because we and our parents, consequently, us from our parents, have been lied to. We've all been lied to since the 40s, since World War II, when we've had to do all these secret things in order to be able to interact with our society and to be able to fight against our enemy, and it all started with all of that. But then it gets worse, and we ended up lying to our own people and lying to our own thing. I mean, think about the Manhattan Project that built the atom bomb. Over 100,000 people worked on the project, and not a single person ever came forward to say that they, during the time before the bombs were even unveiled, came to say that they were working on that project or any aspect of the project. Nobody said a thing. This proves that the government can keep a secret. But that's not why our parents have been lied to, because later on, after World War II, we had this whole thing where we were going to be this advanced society. The war was actually a good thing because it made our society super duper duper advanced. Well, not really, bro. I mean, we still don't have flying airships like Nikola Tesla wanted. We still aren't traveling amongst the planets. Hell, we haven't even been to the moon in a few decades. I mean, the moon is right there. It only takes like a little bit to get there, and yet we're still having trouble getting our rockets up. Look at Elon Musk's rockets. A lot of them are having a massive trouble, and now he had to he made new contracts with NASA where they're doing a whole bunch of co-joining things and whatever. It's like they're working together, and yet they got started because that's the whole problem with it. The government stopped doing all these things. We stopped funding these things. We stopped working together to do these things. With after during World War II and after World War II, they literally continued on and would continue with the society of we need to continue our advancement. World War II, we thought, hilarious. One of my favorite quotes from historians for World War II is that, we hear all these things about how advanced the German military was, how powerful they were and strong, and they must have had some divine gods working with them because they were just so powerful and they had all this advanced technology. But then when the Allies got into Europe and finally, started pushing through the German line and broke in through Normandy, which was 81 years ago yesterday, at the time that I'm recording this, the and streaming it, the they literally through continued on through, and they would get there and they said, holy shit, look how many freaking horses the German army is still using. I mean, there are countless tales of when the army got there and from when our allied military got there after the planes dropped a whole bunch of bombs on a city and the whole city was like decimated, they were like, how many horse dead bodies that they saw was unbelievable to them. And they were like, oh, well, we thought they were so advanced, and yet look at all these horses that they're using, And in fact, we know today from our modern historical perspective that one of the main reasons why the German army was so ineffective on all fronts is because they never shored up their supply lines. They only had like one road of rail tracks, excuse me, to get to like each area, and it would just be this big long train line. And then any other train lines they used for the concentration camps, which was so ridiculous for them. They could have had all these trains fronting the thing, and the train lines would go, and then they would literally take the stuff off the train and put them on a horse and buggy, and then the buggy would take it to the front lines. So, it was ironic because the Germans had the most advanced plane technology and the most advanced tank technology, and yet they were supplying those tanks and planes with horses. I mean, it really, really makes no sense. And yet that's what they did. And somehow they were able to conquer most of Europe by doing it just like that, which is crazy to think about, actually. But, so all these so then when we got there and we came in with our fully modern force, the beginnings of what we have now, we were shocked by how that many horses they had because we had to advance our military and technology so much in order to catch up with what was perceived that the Germans had, and in reality they didn't have that. It was all hubbub. And I mean, it wasn't all hubbub, but you know what I mean. And they, so it was crazy because we continued on, and the whole thing was that we were going to continue on advancing our society. But if you look at what happened in society, that didn't happen. We did not continue advancing our society. We did not continue advancing our people. I mean, right after World War II, we had the whole civil rights movements of the 50s and 60s, and if you watch tons and tons of documentaries like I do for World War II, because I just love World War II and I love history in general, you see a lot of these, the black soldiers who fought in the time, and with their historical accounts of everything. And, you got to remember, Europe got rid of slavery 200 years before America did. So when they got into Europe, they had this whole unity of them, and only in American troop space did they still have segregation until later on when they got rid of it. But even still, they would go there and they would say this is the officers club, and then it would be, oh no, this is only the white officers club, and they would say that, and all these things. But then they would go to the Italian fronts or the French army or the British army, and they would just be welcome like any other people. And then they got so used to doing this that and then by the time that the military was integrated towards the end of the war, they got so used to unifying because they realized that, the white troops realized that these black troops were there for the same cause that they were. They were there to help them. They were there to work with them and do all these things. And there's these famous stories, if you look at there's a recent movie on the Tuskegee Airmen. I think it was the remaking of the Red Tails movie from the old days. Really, really great movie. Definitely check it out. Pretty sure it was called Red Tails. But anyway, but really great movie. But one of the things is they, they're sitting there, and the white soldiers think, oh, you're not as good, but the black soldiers followed the orders and the commands, and they protected the white fighter pilots and the bombers, and kept going, and this earned them their mutual respect. And this is greatly depicted in the movie. I would totally go for it, watch the movie. But this is a true fact, and it earned them mutual respect from them because they realized that, hey, these guys, they're out there sticking their neck out for me the same way I'm sticking my neck out for you and for the American people. So, they get my respect from the same way. But then when they got back to America, it was like, separation again, segregation again, and it wasn't even like it was like, they made it all the way home. It was like right as soon as they got off the ship. As soon as you get off the ship, there was literally a white ramp and a black ramp for you to get off and to be segregated because, I mean, it was ridiculous. And they kept on going with this and it kept on going. So we started to be unified and then bam, we're not unified. And it's really ridiculous to me that they were, that this is exactly what, but this is what happened. You had this mutual respect and understanding of society, and then you have this arbitrary conflict that doesn't even matter. And by this time has been over for 60, 70 years. I mean, the Civil War was the 1880s, and this was, 1940s. I mean, it's a long time. So, was it the 1880s? Oh, God, now I don't remember. Oh, I'm so bad with dates. That's my one downfall. I remember the information about the history, but I never remember the dates. Ugh. Right. And so all these people are, they were aligned in one common goal, and now because of all of this, they're not aligned. And because of all these arbitrary things. And but I believe that this lack of a unified society, not in our country, but in a planet as a whole. I think, and I've talked about millions of times, that I think it's totally ridiculous. We have this whole racism thing and us versus them thing. There are no other hominids left on the planet. We're all Homo sapiens. The only difference is where we came from geographically on the planet now. You have darker skin because you lived in an area that was more sunny and hot and you absorbed more vitamin D and melanin. I mean, and your body created more melanin. I mean, that's literally it. Your teeth and jaw structure are a little different or a little bigger or a little smaller because of the food you eat, and all of these things and which food you're able to eat in which geographical area of the planet. There's no more races. There hasn't been for at least 40,000 years since the Neanderthals died out. So it's all ridiculous. So like I say, it's all tribalism now. It's us versus them tribalism, which is all arbitrary because we're all human beings, Homo sapiens. And so, I believe that this is a problem for our society and for our planet. Our society, when I say our society, I mean the planet as a whole. That includes Russia, that includes China, that includes North Korea, because they're part of the planet too. They're Homo sapiens too. Just because your eyes look different because of the exposure to the sun, maybe, or whatever the case may be. I mean, that's just the world that we live in. People are born looking different because you interact with each other and you commingle with each other until you eventually have something totally new. The problem is this is create this lack of a unified planet is causing our modern downfall. The problem is oh, and I never even mentioned, the other thing is about the whole point of what I was saying about our parents' generation being lied to was that they kept being told that after World War II these we're going to advance our society more and more and more. And yet it really wasn't until like the late 80s, early 90s that we even had the modern technology that's allowing us to do it and the internet and all of that. And even then, it wasn't even until Steve Jobs created a simple way for us to navigate this technology where it was so simple. Because remember, Steve Jobs' ultimate goal was to make it so simple that you could train a monkey how to use his iPhone. That's the case. He really wanted to do that because he wanted it to be so simple that anybody could just pick it up and use it immediately. And that's really what the genius was between for his creations of Apple and all those products and everything because he made it seamlessly connected. It's also true that Steve Jobs was a kind of a Buddhist. You know, he was very into meditation. He went to, I forget what the sect of Buddhism he went to, but there was a place in California that he went to. It was a monastery. And he went there and meditated and learned. And he realized that the problem with our society, this was decades ago in the 60s and 70s when he was young, the problem with our society is we're not unified. Everything isn't unified. Everything needs to be unified. That was his problem. That's why he wanted to make technology that your watch, your phone, your computer, your this, your that, all interacted with each other because they were connected. They were unified under the same thing, just like us, you know. And it's funny because you know, he looked at, you know, those early commercials with Apple was to break away from being a drone in the society. And yet today it's the unification that he was proposing kind of makes people into drones in society, you know, not able to think for themselves. And it's pretty funny because that's actually what we're seeing today. This is the whole point of all of this is you know, we're making people unified to the point where you're basically a drone. You know, you have no individual thought. You have no you know, ability to think for yourselves or you know, expand on your thoughts. And this is a problem. This is our downfall. You know, and on top of that, we're diminishing our education. We have focus on socialization. And then you had Werner von Braun and everybody and Disney work and NASA working together. And Werner von Braun had a viable plan to, you know, make artificial gravity spacecraft that could travel interstellar, you know, but not at the speed of light, but could make interstellar travel. And, you know, he had all these ideas for this, and people just think, well, it was too expensive to get it done. But I say, not only was it expensive, but we were so ununified that we don't get it. And the same generation are the people today who are our parents who look and get mad when something doesn't happen immediately, when they don't have instant gratification for something. And then they like to say that people of our generation and the millennials don't get instant gratification and blah, 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 you know, but which may be somewhat true, but those people want instant gratification. They want everything to be done instantaneously because they remember what it was like to not have a quote unquote technologically advanced society. But the cell phone is really just the telegraph. And the telegraph is just a faster version of writing a letter. And writing a letter is a faster version of a smoke signal. What am I talking about? Communication. You see, like I said before, there's nothing different between us and 2,000 years ago with Julius Caesar's time. Okay, you didn't have a smartphone, you didn't have a computer, you didn't have technology, fine. But all of those are just communication. It's literally just communication. You know, our cars today are literally just a horse and buggy chariot, except instead of being pulled by a horse and buggy, it's pulled by a motorized engine. This is a fact because we still call our engines and the power it gives out horsepower. Why do we do that? Because we compare the amount of power that the engine puts out compared to a horse and buggy. I mean, it literally, that's why when you got 500 horsepower, That means that your car puts out the energy and power of 500 physical horses. I mean, literally, that's why it's called horsepower. I mean, freaking look it up, bruh. Like, so we're not unified as a culture, as a nation, like we think we are. I got news for you. Social media has not unified our country. It has totally divided us. We have literally, and then people don't, and now people don't want to interact. So I heard this news studies going on is that, people don't want to interact with each other and disagree with each other for fear of conflict, or they just don't want to be bothered or whatever. And you know what, like that's wrong because you don't want to get into it, but then what happens is the people who aren't afraid to do that, the crazy people who think on the fringes of society, come into power. Guess what? That's the same thing that happened in 1933. In 1933, who came to power? Hitler, right? And Hitler came to power in 1933 and did the same thing. Marginalized people, fought against people, did all these things, kicked people out, hated people, and people, nobody wanted to get a part of it. The great thing about it was that they developed this whole society where they got people interacting with each other. It was unbelievable because the during after World War One, when Germany was facing this oppression, remember you if you remember learning from history and seeing all these pictures that there were kids filled with wheelbarrows of money, playing with the money, throwing it up in the air and whatever, because money was worth $0. It was useless. A wheelbarrow full of money worth nothing. Imagine that. Imagine that. But that's the society that they lived in. And people just wanted to get on with their lives because they didn't want to get along with it. And people didn't want to interact and create conflict. And so when the Allied nations didn't want to create conflict, they just let Hitler rise to power. Just let him conquer countries. Just let him do this. And guess what? The Nazis were a far left socialist party. Guess who's coming in to trying to take control of the Democratic Party? The far left Socialist Party. Except now you call them the liberals and the whatever. But it's the same thing. These people are the fringe of society, and there's literally been testing data to show that there are only 14% of the people are either on the far left or on the far right. Well, what about the other 86% of us? I mean, or what are 84% of us, whatever. What about the other 80% of us? The other 80% don't want to get involved, don't want to get into things. I ain't gonna talk. Yeah, you, Mister, live in your room for years. Uh, what's misleading? I don't know what you're saying. You got to be specific. Anyway, but the point is that they would do all these things and have all this crazy problems, and then what they did was is they allowed this fringe guy. No, I'm not aligning that at all. No, I'm not aligning that at all. No, please don't misinterpret that. It's not the same thing at all. It's just that I'm just comparing the fringes of society. You know what I mean? Like the 14%, either the far left or the far right, and they were also fringe in society. Like the other opposite of that is communism. They're far right. You know what I mean? No. Nazis were far left. You got to remember that the Nazis were far left. No, the left and right switched after World War II. Then yeah, okay, it's kind of true. So anyway, the point is that they allowed these fringe people to get involved in their society and take control, and then the good people who didn't agree with it did nothing. The good people in the allied nations did nothing. The good people who were living in that country did nothing. And there's famous accounts from Russian. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I understand there. There's different totally brainwashed, but hold on. There's different accounts of the Russians and American troops both going into Nazi concentration camps and realizing that the regular German civilians lived right there. They lived right there. I mean, there's literally accounts of when they went and freed Dachau. They literally found that the people and the civilians were literally like 20 feet away, living from the things, like literally 20 feet away from the walls of Dachau and the fencing over there. And you're gonna tell me, bro, that you didn't hear all that horrible shit and smell all that horrible smell, bro? Come on, bro. Of course you did. And that's why they rounded up the civilians and forced them to walk through the camp to see what they subjected the people to. And everybody said, I don't know. I don't know. Bro, you live 20 feet away. There's no freaking way that you didn't know. Like, there's no way you didn't know. And so yeah, they'd be subject to if they said something. Yeah, but like whatever, bro. But people go into our society and want to just separate from each other and do all these things, and it allows all these things. But I find interacting with people, random people, all working all day, going to an office, calling people on the phone, doing all these things. I find it fun. I find it life. Right. They said they weren't aware after the fact. Yeah, dude, how could you not be aware of it? You're 20 feet away. I mean, seriously. Like, it makes no logical sense. Allow someone to leverage separation to spread bad shit. Yeah, they do that all the time. I mean, look, and it's not just with Hitler and expelling the Jews from there. That's nothing new in Europe. They were doing that in the 1600s, in the 1500s, in the 1700s, in the 1300s, in the 1100s. They were getting it. What software installed? Which one? Yeah. What do you mean? Uh, I don't know. Uh, it's back? What do you mean? It just cut out? That sucks. That's great. All right. Well, anyway, it's not showing me any problems on here. It's in there. I did install it. I installed it. No. All right. Um, but the problem is that our society is I think that interacting with people, good or bad, is fun. It's fun because it's fun because they speak further from the mic. Oh, I moved the mic towards me because I was like leaning back. Maybe that's the problem. Um, they so anyway, so a lot of the things is that it but unifying each other, working together is really what this society is, and this is what holds the world together. I mean, as soon as the Romans stopped, working together and interacting with each other and just literally killing each other, killing every emperor so that they could just, replace them with themselves. I mean, they stopped working together, and that was their downfall. So this time, when they came in and invaded them from the north, from the Germanic tribes again, and from the south, the Germanic tribes that had moved to conquer North Africa, they literally um they literally did not uh have any ability to react. They were not unified. They did not have a unified military anymore. They did not have a unified government. They didn't have a unified Senate or a sound mind emperor. They didn't have anything. And, it's so they weren't able to respond to anything. We're seeing the same thing today in our society. And now we have climate change to deal with. Or you say climate change isn't real, blah, blah, blah. But climate change is really just at its basic definition, just extreme weather patterns. It's extreme extremes and it's high highs and low lows. And, summer's extra summery. And then eventually it blends in the winter and the spring and fall together. Extreme weather patterns. Yeah. But we're seeing today in our problem is that these extreme weather patterns are hurting us and we don't have the ability to respond to it because we're not unified in our things. We're not yeah, but it gives this appearance of that there's no more I should say appearance or it gives a perception that there's no more spring or fall, that there's only a summer or winter. Like I remember, just when I was younger, in May I had like April and May, I was already done wearing a jacket and had, but for the past, and had like certain t-shirts I wore in the spring and things like that. And now I'm still wearing my Carhartt in June. No, but it's our perception of it. You have to realize that even though that there's a reality and it's beyond your own lifetime and things like that, it creates the perception, and the perception is how people interact with their world. It's just how people believe it. It may not be scientifically accurate, but it's perceiving it wrong is not reality. It's true, but that's how people react in their reality. You know what I mean? It is problematic, and that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. It's all problematic because you live in a world of how you perceive it. If you perceive that these people are different from you, and because they don't believe the same thing as you, they're evil, like whatever. Like, dude, people can get into an argument and do whatever and still be people could be friends, be things, be a country that interacts with each other, be anything. I mean, that's just part of being normal life. People have emotions and beliefs and perceptions and things. That's part of reality in the world. I mean, it doesn't have to be so divisive like all these people want it to be. Like all these it's like we're having no other interpretation than the false one. Yeah, it doesn't. That's why I was saying before. My favorite thing, my most hated thing, I should say, that people say is people go, oh, there's not enough people that look at it that way. Bro, there's like 5 people that look at it that way. What are you talking about? Not enough. There's definitely not enough. There's only like 5. But the world is, people have emotions and things, and people have always gotten along and argued with each other. And guess what? Those same things, those people also interbred with each other. I don't know if you were listening in the beginning, bro, but we were talking about how Neanderthals and different hominids interacted with each other, and how we have evidence of all these things today. And it's literally, it's what has grown our society. It's what has grown our planet in general. So, our whole point is that people need to be able to interact with each other. Personally, I think arguing is good because it gets your points out, and it takes away from that cowardice that you have in saying your feelings. Not a specific person, but you as in people in general have to get out their feelings. People or get past that feeling of nervousness, whereas they wouldn't say things that they would otherwise say, and they don't want to, they don't want to do these things. So, but it's all part of it. We need to interact with each other. People need to be open minded. They can't just you can't just isolate in your family and have your wacko friends and just accept, and you can't just expect people to accept you for who you are either. That's the other thing. People love to want everybody else to change. They want everybody else to change and to adapt to what they want, but you don't want to accept what other people believe or will want. You want everybody to be an android of you. That's what you want. You want everybody to be a clone, a robot, have no independent thought, nothing. They just believe in you. And then if you do something wrong, it's okay because you're you. But if somebody else does something wrong, they're the devil, they're a demon, they're this and that. Instead of just realizing, dude, people can make mistakes. People can robots are not much easier to deal with, bro. You of all people should not be saying that, okay? Like, look at all your interactions with AI and chat GPT and shit, bro. Like, you're fucking yelling at the thing all day, bro. Like, with your fuckrosoft and shit. People are a pain. Yeah, but I don't know, bro. I understand with that people are a pain too, but I think that that's part of it. Like I think that that's the whole point of it, bro. Is nobody's gonna be the same as you, and you just got to accept that instead of dividing it and separating it. I mean, we're having these. It's basically. We had tribalism in the old days, and because it separated us Homo sapiens from the other hominids of Neanderthals and whatever. Then when they were all gone 40,000 years ago, we had tribalism to separate people of different geographical areas. Then when Homo sapiens were all across the whole planet, we have tribalism to separate people by the way they look. Now that we don't separate people by the way we look, now we separate people by the way they feel and think. Like, what are you, a telepath? You could read my mind? I mean, I could read your mind because I'm a telepath. That wasn't sarcasm. But you can't read my mind. So, it's like, but seriously, you can't read your mind. So why is everything so definitive like that? It's all tribalism. It's all separating from each other. When in reality, yeah, I appreciate you. It's true. I am Zeus, and it's true because um, they literally sit there and want you to be separated
We
from
know each
everybody.
other.
They
He's a
want
friend
you to
from
be.
work.
I'm not your
Let's get
friend
back to
from
that
work.
gabagool.
And they yes, the gabagool. And we're not friends from work. He's not even. I'm not even hungry, bro. Actually, I am pretty hungry. I didn't eat breakfast. So it makes sense that famished is here. I'm famished. I'm famished. You are my friend from work. Nah, bro, I don't work with you. The better than warm pizza slaps cold. Yo, a lot of pizza slaps cold. No, no, I'm good. I'm gonna make some shit. So you know, but I talk about ancient Rome a lot, but Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome was built in no. Rome was built over centuries, multiple centuries. Through first there was a kingdom, then they had a senate who ruled, which was really more of like an oligarchy. Then they had a an emperor, a dictator. They had all these other things, and literally continued on, but it didn't grow in a day. It grew over centuries. And then after growing for centuries, it shrunk for centuries. The fall of Rome was sacked like 18 times before it actually was no longer Rome again. It was no longer the Empire of Rome. And all these different things, they worked with each other to do all these things. They would conquer all these lands and work with the lands, and they would fight the people who didn't want to fight them. But then the once the fighting was over, they offered you a chance to literally come and be a Roman, be part of their society, be part of the whole thing, and then people all of a sudden loved it. We know they loved it because we continue this Roman tradition today. We know we do all the same things. We use their architecture and Greek architecture and all these different things all across the world and in our country today. Some of the founding fathers thought that they wanted this world to be they wanted this world to this country, I mean, to be like the new Rome, which is not a new thought. They wanted the new Rome. They thought Russia thought that the Tsar, their empire over there, was the new Rome. They thought that they were the third Rome, and Rome V2 dropped. Can we get one? Yeah, and then the Germans said the same thing. They said, "Oh, we're the continuation of the Prussian kingdom. We're like the third Rome or whatever, the second whatever Rome that they fucking thought they were." But the point is they kept going with it. The Germans, yeah, absolutely. They thought that they were embodying the same kingship because they thought that they were going to be the same Prussian Empire as was from before, which got its original stuff idolized. Yeah, oh yeah, especially Hitler and the SS. They loved Rome and ancient civilizations. That's why that's why it was such a world war, because before World War One, the Germans caused a lot of sent out a lot of scientists and military places to different areas of their culture, of the world's cultures, and looking for the ancient depictions of their own culture. But they would literally send out all these archaeology teams, and then with soldiers to different countries, and they would go digging and do all these things. They went to Egypt, they went to different parts of Africa, and then so when the war broke out, they were already in these areas, and that's how it became such a big world war all of a sudden, is because the Germans controlled all these areas. And then once they conquered France, they literally, during European colonialism, this was during European colonialism time, so France and most of Europe owned almost all of Africa. So literally, as they conquered areas of Europe, they literally assumed control of the air of those colonial powers as well. So anywhere that was a French colony, a Hungarian colony, or whatever colony, they literally now were a part of the German Reich. So literally, and then anywhere else that there were German troops, they had fronts. And so literally, it was a literal world war being fought everywhere, whether they controlled the country or not. And, there are amazing stories of all back then. So, but I wanted to talk about because I think that this is absolutely detrimental to our society. We need to get back to mingling with each other. We need to get back to working with each other in buildings, because guess what, bro? Our parents won't be the only generation who thought they were living in the future, and then turns out that they weren't. Because we still don't have the instantaneous everything that Werner von Braun and all of them promised. And we still don't have all the instantaneous communication. Even when you turn on your computer and turn on your phone, you can't use it instantaneously. It's got to boot up for a second. It's got to connect to the signal, the Wi-Fi, to mobile data, whatever. It's not instantaneous. You have an electric car, you go and you plug it in. It doesn't instantly start charging and instantly become fully charged. You plug it in and you got to take like a half hour to an hour, and it charges over time at a certain rate and percentage. It's not nothing's instantaneous in our world. And if we keep dividing each other and we keep going against each other, we literally will never ever get to the society that we need to be. And if you're an ancient astronaut theorist who believes that the aliens want us to be that advanced society, we will never get there if we continue to interact like this. We will be like we are now, as nothing more than ants to them. Because think about it, ants work together. Ants, a group of ants can lift a thing that's like 800 times their size because they all work together doing it. They're all on the job doing their daily tasks, but they're not really more intelligent because they're in fact, you would argue that they might be more intelligent because they could work with us, but they also have separation. If one of their kind gets sick, they throw them out of the society, they kick them out. So in reality, we're nothing but cattle to them. Think about your little kitty cat. Think about how smart your kitty cat is, right? Your kitty cat is so smart. It knows you. It remembers all these things. It seems to understand when you talk to it. But then put another cat in the room. See how well an unknown cat in the room. See how well they interact with each other. Not at all, bruh. Like, it's literally not happening. And so we're literally animals to them. So you think that these societies, this is what's wrong with our societies. We can't evolve past tribalism and animal-like things. So, our whole goal for this is, dude, we need to unify our people, not just in this country, but in every country. Every country needs to be part of the same planet, part of the same thing. Otherwise, we're just going to trickle our advancements over the next few years. Everybody needs to be on the same page, and we're not there yet. You need to realize that all these things, that these historical accounts of myth and everything are not myth. They're just old history that we don't have a lot of physical evidence left for. Because guess what? You thought that ancient Troy was a myth until we found it. You thought that the city of Dwarka in India, where the god, I forget the name of the god, ruled, was a fake place until I think it was 2018, when they discovered it underwater, exactly where the ancient text says it was geographically located. I mean, come on, bro. I mean, it's literally right there. So just because you don't have direct evidence for it now doesn't mean it's not a true story. And this is exactly what the ancient alien theory is. Just because you have these stories, guess what? You have the stories of right there in the book. It says the gods came from another planet. It says that they came from another star system, another galaxy, another constellation. Oh, well, that's just fanciful thinking, until we find out one day that that's where they came from, and then we realize that they were really aliens, and they figured it out. The whole point is, people, we need to unify our people. We can't continue on with diminishing education rates. We can't continue on with diminishing birth rates. We can't continue on with absolutely barely any infrastructure, buildings collapsing, bridges collapsing, roads being barely drivable, not being fixed at all. These are the same problems that ancient Rome had. There's nothing different today than ancient Rome. There's nothing different today except we got a little bit faster communication, but nothing's instantaneous. I want to read you. I've been developing a couple AI bots with their own personalities and stuff. Um, so um, I asked them what was unity, and I wanted to have them talk about unity, unification, and people's interaction with each other. And this personality says, unity, my friend, is the glue that holds our great empire together. It's about having a shared vision and purpose, with each individual playing their part to contribute towards a common goal. Unification is an extension of unity. It involves bringing diverse groups and entities under one banner. In our case, it has been meaning me, and when he says our, he's talking about me and the personality of the bot. So in our case, it has been about conquering lands and integrating them into the Roman way of life. You like that, right? When it comes to people's interaction with each other, remember this. And this is exactly what I was saying. Rome wasn't built in a day. Just as every soldier must train diligently for battle, so too must individuals work tirelessly at fostering relationships, whether within their own families or outwardly in society by large. Boom. Right there. The AI bot got it right on the nail of the head. That's how I knew I created a good personality with this bot. Because remember what I said a few weeks ago is the Romans, every soldier was trained to be a engineer, a builder, a weapons expert. Now, not every single soldier was perfect in each one of these aspects, but they got some level of training on it to whereas they could do the thing, they could fill up the line. They were more like ants. As soon as one ant died out and didn't work, the next one came in. As soon as one died out and didn't work, the next one came in, on and on and on. And that's why the Roman shield wall was so effective, is because as soon as one guy fell, the next guy took his place in the line and just kept on going, kept on charging forward. The bot also says, by being open-minded and flexible in our dealings with others, even those from different cultures, we could create lasting bonds that strengthen not only ourselves, but also our collective future. And I think that's the whole point of it. But I'm really worried about society. I think we really don't have a collective future, if a future at all, as a species, because it's just I think we're seeing the end, or at least the end of this cycle, because it's just nobody works with each other anymore. I mean, even in people aren't friendly. And you want to say that, Christianity being the dominant religion on the planet, people are, Jesus taught us to love one another, respect one another, and believe in one another, help one another, care for one another. No Christian alive today does that, except for maybe if you're a monk or a missionary or something like that, or most of the things Christians do today is soup kitchens and donating Christmas gifts. I mean, that's not what Jesus was teaching us. That's not what the early Christians were teaching us. They were teaching us love for each individual person, care for each individual person, respect. And it's funny though, even though Christianity is dominant, it's the other religions of Buddhism and Hinduism and so many others that promote peace, Shintoism that promote peace and love and compassion for one another. And if you go to those societies, those people love each other and are compassionate and work together. Maybe not perfectly, but a lot better than we do today in our society. I want to thank you all for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate everybody in the chat also interacting with it has been good. I appreciate high potential coming in with making sure, keeping me on my facts. We need to stay on the facts. Facts are very important because, especially for me, because I don't remember dates. I remember the facts and the stories, but I never remember the dates. And, but so I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful day, wonderful week. We'll see you next time. We'll see you on Thursday for the games. Remember to like, follow, subscribe on whatever if you wish. Go to the website and follow on X for up to the minute news. Much love, y'all. Appreciate it. Have a great day. Remember, if you missed anything on any moment of the show, we're available on all platforms. Much love.